Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. I am so sorry. I was hoping to be there in person, and I was thinking my immune system would be strong enough to combat any back to school germs that my kids brought home, but unfortunately it was not. So I apologize for that, but I'm thankful that we can still continue with the plan of tonight. So throughout tonight, we're going to be talking about three components. The first one will align with pages 1 and 2 of the handbook that I provided. And it's going to be speaking about the emotions that come with money. As Josh mentioned, some money, it often creates that kind of knot in your stomach and isn't often discussed. And so I want to create tools and strategies to make that a little bit more of an easier conversation. The second component will be we'll be talking about the cash flow plan and how to implement strategies and tips and tricks that you can use in your plan to help you get ahead. And that would align, when we talk about that will be pages 3 and 4 of the handbook. And then the last component will be looking at where you are currently, because we can't move ahead in a journey if we don't know exactly where we're moving from. So pages 5 and 6 are there'll be more tools that you use at home, but questions that help you identify where you are in your journey so that you can get ahead into the next chapter that you're wanting to pursue. So as you may have noticed, the title for tonight is Chapter 2 and 3 of your money story. Chapter 1 was written around your childhood dinner table. It was written while you went grocery shopping with a parent. It was written while you eavesdropped on your parents as they discussed the family money situation. Those situations built the foundation of Chapter 2 and 3 of where you are today. As you look back on Chapter 1, there may be some aha moments of why you view money the way you do. Some may be little habits you have where others may trigger big responses or emotions. When I was a kid, we would often go for dinner at A&W, and my dad would order 1 large pop and 4 small cups for our family of 5. I'd often listen to this and think, I just want my own drink. Why do we have to share? And to this day, I read menus from right to left. I look at the price point, and then I decide what I'm going to eat. It is a small habit, but something that was formed in Chapter 1 that has gone with me into Chapter 2 and 3. My husband doesn't read right to left on the menu, so I have had lots of dinner envy. Some of you may have grown up in a home where money was a tense and stressful topic and resulted in lots of fights. Others may have a slightly different, where it was still tense and stressful, but it was never discussed. And then there's a completely different families where it's discussed constantly. It's discussed in a safe and inviting way. Through our evening tonight, my hope is to give you strategies to make conversations easier, to be able to discuss ideas, dreams, fears, and mistakes in a way that empowers you to make decisions in the future, while also empowering the next generation who is writing their Chapter 1 and watching you closely. Money is nothing more than a medium of exchange, something you use to get what you want. However, our culture has allowed money to become a being, to become the measuring stick by which we value ourselves and others. We have allowed money to control us, which is why money and shame so often go hand in hand. We feel shame when we see our neighbors in their brand new vehicle, or when the Amazon delivery truck shows up once again to deliver a package to their front door. That same shameful feeling may appear when you look at the expression on your kids or spouse's face when they have suggested Disneyland or Hawaii vacation and you suggest a camping trip. You might feel your stomach knot up when your friends start discussing dinner out at this new restaurant, or the new car that they're looking at buying, or suggesting going on a getaway friends weekend. Shame is described as an intensely painful feeling of believing that we are flawed. It is different than guilt, which is a natural feeling we experience when we've made a mistake. Shame is believing that we are the mistake. Commit to removing the word shame from your money story. It doesn't deserve a spot in your life. And by crossing it out, you can take steps to move forward and take control, which would allow you to sleep again, dream big again, and realign your actions with your goals. Some common phrases we often say or hear that create emotions such as self-doubt, shame, and confusion are, we can't afford that. I don't know how I'm going to get through this month. I need that. I am terrible with money. I have made such a huge mistake and can't tell anyone about this. Everybody else is way further ahead. My spouse expects me to take care of this all on my own, or alternatively, my spouse takes care of it all. Would our mental state change if we reworded those statements differently? Instead of we can't afford that, what if we acknowledge that that item doesn't fit into your money story? Or that you'd rather spend money elsewhere? Or that if it does fit into your money story, let's design a strategy that gets you there. Instead of I don't know how I'm going to get through this month, say I need to stop, review how things have been going, and plan for the upcoming. I am in control of this. And by taking some time to plan, I can reset our story. I want that versus I need that. Adults are often reminding kids of wants versus needs. But once we reach a certain age, we forget this basic aspect of life. I need new shoes. I need a new sweater. I need a new car. Those things might be true. You might need all those things. But if you stop and evaluate your wants versus needs, you may be able to check yourself on where you really align with that. Let's use the car, for example. You might need a new car, but do you need a new car with Apple CarPlay? Do you need a new car with navigation? Or do you need a new car that gets you from point A to point B? I'm terrible with money. No, you're not terrible with money. You've made some poor decisions, but by being self-aware and intentional, you are able to say, I want to learn from my past, and I want to so I can make better decisions in the future. As Josh said in the intro, money is often not discussed. There is so many money courses that are lacking in our education system. So you are not terrible with money. There's just learning that needs to be done. Everybody else is way further ahead. The battle of comparison eats at all of us, which is why it's important to put comparison into perspective. You don't know their full story. You have different goals than they do. If you're comparing yourself with someone you trust, then ask them for tips and tricks. Outline areas you admire about their story so that you can bring it into the light and maybe grow with them rather than staying in the dark and isolating yourself further. I can't tell anyone about this. Money can be isolating. It is easier to beat ourselves up over and over about our mistakes than ask for help or be vulnerable with other people. No one is immune to the what have I done feeling, which is why it's crucial to name it, focus on the truth, and ask for help. My spouse expects me to take care of all of this on my own, or alternatively, my spouse takes care of it all. Commit today to change your relationship. By working as a team, you can troubleshoot together, dream together, and increase vulnerability and intimacy. Don't wear all the weight yourself, and don't allow the other individual to have no voice or the ability to contribute. If you look at page page 1 of your workbook. Questions 1 and 2 will, I'm just going to bring up, I'll share my screen with you for 1 minute here. So question 1 and 2 allows you to write down phrases you are telling yourself and rewrite the phrases to remove shame and take back control. I'm going to pause for about 5 minutes right now to give you time to think about this and work through it. If you came with a family member or friend or a partner, please work together on this or share your answers with one another. I'm also, as you work on that, I will put up a screen that kind of goes through some of the examples I gave and some ways that you can adjust that thought process. So I will click on that and I'll be back in a couple minutes. Okay. So it's been about 5 minutes. So now we'll carry on to the next section. And I'm going to share this screen with you now as we move into this next part. So money often makes people stressed and lose sleep. However, combine money uncertainty with COVID uncertainty, and there is an environment for a lot of fear. FP Canada reported that in 2020, 38% of those polled viewed money as their top stressor, followed by 25% with personal health, 21% said work, and 16% said relationships. In 2020, 4 in 10 Canadians said that COVID-19 had impacted their financial stress, where 1 in 10 say it has significantly impacted their financial stress levels. When people were asked how the financial stress impacts their life, the 18% said increased health issues, 15% said marriage or relationship problems, 14% said reduced productivity at work, 13% said more family disputes, and 10% said increased mental health and substance abuse challenges. By factoring in the above stresses and being aware of toxic emotions, we can design strategies to create a healthy journey. As we touched on earlier, money can create shame, depression, and loneliness. By breaking down the walls and confiding in a spouse, partner, or close friend or community, you can build an environment that allows growth and accountability. When couples work together on their finances, they increase flexibility to handle life's challenges. They simplify shared financial responsibilities and goals. They create a stronger sense of equality as it changes the mindset from mine or yours to ours. They streamline paying bills. It makes budgeting more transparent and helps to keep each partner accountable. I appreciate that it will not be an easy transition to jump into working together on finances. There might be growing pains and tension as you work towards both being involved. That is why I encourage you as a couple to sit down and outline boundaries. Discuss when you want to talk about money and what you want those discussions to look like. When my husband and I first started on this journey, I asked him not to bring up money after 8:30 at night. He didn't realize that when we discussed money just before bed, my mind would race. I would stress about it all night long. By verbalizing this, I was able to be vulnerable with him about how these discussions were making me feel and why I was feeling this way. We agreed on setting up a scheduled time to discuss things. Sometimes we'd go for a walk. Sometimes we'd have a nice dinner and turn it into a planning and goal setting discussion. As we became more comfortable in our money story, we were able to make these discussions more day-to-day conversations. The conversations will get easier if you commit to working together to grow through the discomfort. In John Mark Comer's book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, he discusses the idea of reviewing your budget with a close friend or community. This activity allows friends to speak into each other's spending habits and hold each other accountable to ensure spending habits and align with the individual's personal goals. It is easy for a spender to justify purchases, but when you know there's a trusted friend holding you accountable, it may cause you to think twice. I appreciate that not everybody has a friend or community that they can rely on to walk alongside them through this journey. If that's the case for you, please touch base with me or another financial coach. And because having somebody alongside you in this journey is so important. I'm going to pause for another 5 minutes or so to give you time to answer questions 3 to 5 if you're married or common law, and question 6 if you are single. I'll put those questions up now as well. may notice under question 5, as you discuss how you can design a safe place to have conversations. I've provided a few different things that you can think about, such as allowing each individual to feel safe in discussing past decisions, mistakes, and accomplishments. This might be easier for some couples than for others, but I encourage you to ask for safety in these discussions and create an environment that is inviting. Okay, I'm going to pause now for a couple minutes. Okay, I'm going to move into the next section now. And please, if you haven't had a chance to complete these questions, I encourage you to continue to work on it as you go home and in the weeks ahead. So now that we have overcome some of the emotions that hold us back from writing our story, I would like to touch on how to design your story. First, you need to start with a why. In order to move ahead, you need to define something you are working towards. Once you have that why, it may allow you to determine if your spending habits are getting you closer or further. During the summer, my 7-year-old and 4-year-old decided they both wanted a new toy. As both of these purchases were more of a want than a need, I decided to use it as a teaching lesson. I told them they could spend up to 40% of what they had in their piggy bank on this new item. My daughter was able to buy her new rollerblades that afternoon. My son, on the other hand, wanted a Lego set that was more than what he had. He realized he needed to work and save. He's never been so eager to dust my baseboards before, but it paid off. A few days later, when we were in the store, he saw another thing that he wanted. I asked him if he wanted to continue to work a little bit harder for his Lego set, if he were to buy that today, or if he was willing to put that item back and continue to save for his Lego. He paused for a moment, put the item back, and said, "Nope, I want to keep saving." I realized the Lego set is not your why. And my son's piggy bank is very different than an adult's financial situation. But it was very interesting to watch the power of a goal. This is probably a better question to answer over and think about and ponder over the next few weeks. But what is your why? Why are you here tonight? What are you willing to forfeit today in order to achieve your why in the future? Write your why down in places you will see it, as a reminder for what you are saying yes to and the reasons you are saying no to other things. The next question that you can fill out at home as well is, do you know your take-home pay? Do you know how much you get in your pocket from the hours you work? When I accepted my first salary job, I looked at my offer letter and thought, wow, that's great. I started spending and I started working and spending. I was in a new city with new adventures and a lot of new wants. A couple weeks and months went by, and I realized my expenses were far higher than the amount I was getting in my bank account. One week, I had to eat pumpkin for 4 days straight because my food budget was out of control. It wasn't until I sat down, removed the taxes, CPP, EI, employee benefits, etc., that I realized how much was actually coming into my account. I had to make serious changes to my list of wants. Page 3 of your workbook includes a cash flow plan. There may be similar tools and apps available online, but I wanted to include this one as it separates committed expenses from emotional expenses. This again is obviously something you'll complete at home, but I'll walk you through an overview of it tonight. First, you want to look at your monthly income. This is the money you receive in your account. Then you want to add any additional income that you're getting, either from rental properties, investments, etc. Secondly, you want to work through your committed expenses. These are usually payments that don't bring you joy and are often paid automatically. They are things that are consistent, don't change a lot month to month, or can easily be averaged out throughout the year. There are things like your mortgage, your rent, your car payment, your home and car insurance, your utilities, your gas, cell phone or landline, debt payments. Emotional expenses, on the other hand, are things that bring you joy. They're things like groceries, dining out, wine and beer, entertainment, coffee, clothing. Emotional expenses are controllable. I agree, you need to eat, but you also get to control what you are eating and the time and energy you use to plan the meal, the ingredients, and from where you are buying those ingredients. To figure out your controllable money, the money that you get to work with each month, you would take your monthly take-home pay, the number that we calculated first, and then you subtract your committed expenses. This is the amount that you are in control of. Now I want you to walk you through a calculation to complete your emotional spending sweet spot. I'm going to share my screen again for this one, just so it's not a bunch of numbers. Okay, so your emotional spending sweet spot is your annual take-home pay divided by 52 times 21%. So this is the amount that you want to try to get your monthly expenses, your weekly expenses within. You can adjust this number slightly, but if you go too high, you're going to eat into potential savings or money used to pay off debt. If you go too low, it will be too hard to sustain the new habit. It's similar to an extreme eating regime versus finding that perfect number of calories. You might look at me right now and think, what is the point of this? How can I possibly get ahead by looking at my emotional expenses? Benjamin Franklin once said, "Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship." By taking control of your emotional expenses, you are able to take control of your spending habits, give intention to where your money is going, and easily pivot when needed. So you'll need to figure out what works best for you. It may take some trial and error, but don't get discouraged. For that emotional money, do you want to take it out of your bank account each week and spend cash and only pay with cash? Or do you want to set up a separate bank account where that money goes into each week and then you're working from a debit card? What I have found works best for me is having a separate bank account. Every Friday morning, our 21% emotional goes into the emotional spending bank account. We spend from there during the week. We can log into our banking app at any point and see where we're at. We are working as a team with it. We know the plan and the purpose, which reduces fights and decreases chances of the blame game. By implementing this strategy, you are able to find the lost cash. We often underestimate our emotional expenses. A few years back, before implementing this habit, I called my Visa card company and boldly stated that my credit card number must have been stolen as my transactions were out of control. The employee on the other end graciously walked me through some of the expenses and gently asked if I was sure these purchases were not all mine. Then it hit me because I did not have an intentional mindset. I had spent almost $2,000 on my meaningless tapping. $10 at Shoppers Drug Mart to pick up an afternoon snack, $7 at Starbucks, $15 bottle of wine, $23 at the grocery store, another $7 at Starbucks, another afternoon snack. The list went on and on and on. This is an example of the lost cash. You may hit some roadblocks during this exercise. One roadblock may be that the emotional spending sweet spot is way too low, which is because there's not enough money coming in. And that's a tough spot to be in. But we are in a society now that loves the side hustle. And there are some great ways to increase that money, that cash flow. I came up with a short list. I'm sure there are many more that are out there, but one that I often resort to is selling things from around our house. It's crazy the clutter that builds up. Or offer to babysit a friend, neighbor, or family member. If you're good at teaching, tutor. If you're artistic, start an art class for kids. If you receive hourly wage, ask your manager if you can work more hours in the week. If you love to clean, start a cleaning business. If you love to do administrative tasks or are great with computers, start a side business of helping small business owners organize their files and streamline their processes. Drive for Uber. Start a dog walking business. Another roadblock may be that you have no controllable money left over after committed expenses. If that's the case, then I would encourage you to work through your committed expenses. Your mortgage or rent may be too large for what your income is. Your car payment might be too large for your level of income. Or your cell phone bill, or the number of subscriptions people have and that we all have are eating away at that fixed income, or eating away at that committed expense section. So by taking the time to review these expenses, you are taking control and evaluating what is really important. On pages 5 and 6, I've designed some questions to help you identify where you currently are in your story. Do you have an emergency fund? 2020 taught us that life is unpredictable. By having an emergency fund, you have peace of mind that when the what if happens, you have funds to be in control. Ideally, you want to set aside enough money to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses. If you have debt currently, other than your mortgage, then I'd recommend starting with $1,000 and focus on the remaining amount after the debt is paid off. If you have debt, list it from the smallest balance to the largest balance. Take the lost cash in the exercise above and commit to eliminating the smallest debt. Then once that is gone, you tackle the next smallest until you've eliminated all your debt but your mortgage. As you work through pages 5 and 6, take note of whether you have investments and credit card debt or line of credit debt. Each situation is slightly different, but take a look of what your return on your investments is versus the interest you're paying on your debt. In most situations, I would recommend paying off all debt except for a mortgage before you start an investment portfolio. Your money story is a journey. There will be chapters that are harder than others and sections that take more effort. But by thinking of it as a journey, you are acknowledging the need to review, monitor, and adjust when necessary. In closing, Rachel Cruz wisely said, 80% of your winning with money is about your discipline, your consistency, your daily choices. You're the one controlling where your ship goes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. Guys, I hope you found this really helpful. This worksheet, again, can be used on your own time to figure out, as you work through those calculations. And I know I definitely learned a lot. And I think no matter what stage you're at in life, this is whether you're a university student, or have a family, single, married, common law, this is applicable for all of us. And so we want to open it up now for Q&A time. So again, because it was supposed to be Erin was live here because she's on Zoom, if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll come over to you. And then you can tell the question to me and then I'll just speak into the mic for safety for everyone with COVID. And then Erin, you can address it. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
So who has some questions? Can be anything to do with finance, anything around your personal situation. If you guys want to ask, if you're comfortable. Also, Erin, do you want to maybe just share some resources about your company and your website as well?
Yeah, for sure. So my company is called Bread and Butter Wealth. And the reason I named it that is because so much of finances nowadays and the education that's provided starts once people have already reached the point and they're reached a certain stage. And so I wanted to go back to the basics and make sure that my business was designed for any questions and designed in a safe way where people could ask questions and feel empowered and learn in the process. I guess more on that, Josh, is that if anybody does have questions that they think of down the road, I would be more than willing to speak with each one of you and maybe one day meet face to face. But I should have provided my email address, but maybe Josh, on the link that you post, I will also give you my business email address for that as well.
Yeah, we'll put up the website and her email online.
Yeah.
I have one, Erin, actually. In regards to that, you talked about that sweet spot. If you have variable income coming in, or even as things start to change with jobs or maybe job loss, how it's not consistent income?
So if it's not consistent, I'd say average, what is the lowest monthly income that you usually have? So if if, for instance, if there's commission, or if then you want to take the lowest that you usually get and base it off that. And then as things come in, then you're able to maybe use that income to pay off debt or put a lump sum towards debt. If it's completely variable, what we may want to do is work backwards. So figure out what your committed expenses are and what your emotional expenses are looking like now, and how much debt you currently have, and kind of work back to what is the minimum. And it might be a bit of guess and test as we kind of calculate through that spreadsheet, but what do you need to be making to reach your goals and to make sure that you're growing? Because if you're not growing, then you're moving backwards. So
awesome, thank you. Anybody else in the live audience here have any questions? Sure. So Lori had a question, Aaron, about, sorry, can you repeat it one more time? The emotional spending sweet spot. What are you doing with that money?
So that is what is going towards so your groceries come out of there, your clothing comes out of there, your coffee comes out of there, your dining out comes out of there. So what I love about this strategy is it's week by week. And so if, for instance, you know that you've got a big dinner out coming up, you're able to say, okay, well, then I'm going to reduce my coffee budget, or I'm going to reduce my coffees for the next few days, or I'm going to eliminate, maybe buy less groceries, or change how I'm going to eat throughout this week, so that everything's kind of works out of that one pocket, or that one account, sorry.
Does that answer that? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Got another one over here. Get my steps in on my new Apple Watch. I'm kind of having some guilt buying this Apple Watch now. It was on sale.
It was on sale.
We had a question about where that 21% comes from in that calculation you gave.
Where the number? It's actually, there is a lady from out east, and she has designed this approach, and that's where I'm kind of built my business from. I thought it was such a great way to look at it. And so that 21% kind of works at what is enough room to give you money to save as well. So I did not come up with that number, that sweet spot exactly, but I know originally when she started with 15%, and 15% was a little bit tight and tricky for people. So I think that 21% has, with the people that I've worked with and the business that she's run, has allowed her to, or it allows the clients to get ahead while also maintaining a sustainable lifestyle.
Does that answer your question? Perfect. Anybody else?
I guess in more on that, if you find that the 21% isn't, like, if you're getting discouraged by that 21%, maybe go up to 26%, or go up a little bit. And then slowly, as you get more comfortable with it, pull that number back and try to work off it. Don't allow yourself to get discouraged, because that it's your story and your journey. So by working and creating something that works for you is better than getting discouraged and not growing in it.
Awesome. I have another one. Around some of the stuff around, certified financial coaches, and is that something you would recommend to an average person, or do you think it's, with the strategies you presented today and in future seminars, is it pretty doable on someone's own to tackle this?
I think there's always value in growing more. It depends on which stage people are at. Like if this is a great foundation to build into, and then maybe once this foundation is built, or if questions arise through this, then there may be even more opportunity to grow and learn from different strategies. But at this point, this can definitely help get somebody to the next chapter. There's probably room for, there's so much more within the personal finance, like when to incorporate investments and when to incorporate what debt should look like, or different strategies. And it might depend on each person's personal preference. If people, that accountability coach, if somebody appreciates that accountability coach and somebody walking alongside them, then there is huge value in having that, the financial coaching relationship.
Awesome. Is there any other questions? Yeah. One second. Steps. The question was, any particular books or resources on finance that you would recommend to people?
Yes. I'm looking around my area right now, hoping to,
You could also potentially post a resource sheet.
yeah, that's a great idea. One that let's do that. There's quite a few that I've really liked, and there's some that are really wordy, and there's some that are can kind of take the jargon out of it. So
any off the top of your head that you recommend?
Yeah, the one so there's Money, a Love Story by Kate Northrup. That's a great one to work through. My only complaint with that one is there's a lot of questions and journaling that goes along with it. And sometimes it's a little bit too much journaling for just the pick up and read. There's also The Behavior Gap by Carl Richards, which is a pretty interesting one about just the ways that we can interfere with, and the ways that we impact our own story. For instance, he talks about owning 4 pairs of skis for those, so that he is prepared for every ski day. But sometimes we just over prepare, and then when the ski day comes, you don't really know what skis you want to use. And so he kind of dives into how we overcomplicate finances, which is a really good one.
Awesome. Okay, another question. Ooh, great question. When and how do you talk about finances in dating?
Oh, that is a good question.
Is this a first date topic, a third, second,
It's probably not a first date topic, but it is an important aspect of dating. And it might be probably when there's actual a commitment to trying to make it work, there's probably a conversation about, okay, how do you spend money? And what are your spending habits? And what are some of the lessons that you learned in chapter 1? I know for myself, my husband and I came from very different chapter 1 stories, where his family, he grew up knowing what the mortgage payments were, what debt that his family had, how much the business was worth. And so there were no questions, where my family handled things very different with that. So I think and before my husband and I got married, the marriage counseling that we had to do through our church. They had a money seminar, which was fabulous. And money is it's so important to make sure that you're on the same page with money and how you view debt and willingness to talk about money and be a part of each other's journey with that. I would definitely encourage that to be a part of relationship conversation.
Awesome. Did that answer your question fully? Okay. Anybody else? I'm curious. I have so many in my head right now. Around like the motion. So say for example, you go to Starbucks, and, like you see that pumpkin spice latte or whatever it is, and you just that impulse spending. How can you control that? Those urges you have to just free will spend sometimes.
Yeah, and that's why I love the emotional spending bank account, because if that pumpkin spice latte is calling your name, then go for it. But it might mean that you have to forfeit something else in the week. But it's not going to make or break your savings because you've got that money separated from your savings or from your debt payment.
Good. Thank you. You have one? Okay. I think this is your friend, by the way.
Oh, hello.
Her question was, how do you go about starting to choose a bank account? What was the second part? Or a bank in general? Like, what are you looking for with some of those aspects?
Oh, that's a good question too. So there are a lot of different bank accounts and obviously a lot of different banks. Nowadays, as somebody who came from the banking industry, I was on the investment side of the banking industry, but you see the product push. And so I think when you're choosing a bank, I think you first want to choose a bank account that has the services that meet your needs. There's a lot of different bundles and there's some astronomically priced bank accounts that have services that you might not need. So it's looking at what the fee is versus what the service is. And also looking at whether there's bundling within that. Some banks offer where you can get a checking and a savings account and maybe a TFSA account for no fees or less banking fees. And if that's the case, sometimes you might just have to put a small amount in that TFSA account just to keep it active. So there's a few different things to look at. There's also new banks coming out there. I think Canada is in a bit of a transition right now with how banking is done and how financial services are done. So you want to obviously all banks would be pretty equally regulated, but that's probably a question as well, what their CDIC coverage is. So if they go broke, how much of your money is protected by CDIC? And so that's something to look at. But I think the fees, making sure that the fees are for services that you need.
Did that answer it? Okay, perfect. Yeah, you can ask me one. Oh, this is the true secrets. What is your some other money advice that you would not recommend following that you've heard from somebody or people?
Oh, that's another good question. So I'm choosing my words carefully here. So there's a big push to have RSPs and TFSAs, and people often define people's money stories by how much is in their RSP or TFSA. But if you have those accounts and still have debt, I don't think those accounts make sense. Or debt excluding mortgage. Once you are debt free, I think the ability to compound and save through that and get your money working better for you is great. But until there's no line of credits and you're paying off your credit card each month, and then I'd say those accounts or those saving strategies aren't great right now. That is another one, is that some people believe that you only have to pay the minimum of the credit card balance, and that credit cards love people who do that. One thing, going back to the question about banks, one thing to keep in mind is that banks and credit card companies, they love people who have debt, and because debt makes them money. So if people aren't paying off their credit card, they're making 18% off that balance. So if you're not currently paying off your credit card, that's another 18% that you've just spent on your item. And so another one is that debt isn't always a strategy that should be used. A lot of people think that debt is what taking on more debt is what all the high net worth individuals do. And that's not necessarily the case. And that's not something that I would necessarily encourage.
Okay, does that help? Okay, we got one more here.
Sorry, I just realized that screen was still on. Sorry about that.
Question is, what is a credit score and how do you find out what it is?
Oh, that is.
Back to that, from what I'm thinking is there better sites that you recommend? Is that part of it as well? Yeah.
Yeah. That is a good question. And I don't have the site that there's one major site that I don't have on hand right now. I can definitely provide that as well under the resource tab. Credit score is basically all of the companies that you own, that you borrow debt from, and your cell phone companies, they are all rating you. So based on whether you're paying your cell phone bill at a certain time, whether you're paying utilities, all of these companies are rating your efficiency with how you manage money. And so every time that so if you go and want to borrow money, a bank goes into the system and also triggers that on the system, saying, oh, this individual also wants to borrow money, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's another activity on your credit score. So all of these things kind of add up and determine the number that is basically how a bank and financial institutions view you. So I'm not sure if that answered the question. If you'd want more detail about how that credit score is actually determined and what that credit score sweet spot is, I don't have that number on hand, so I could also do a bit of research and put that into the resource tab if you'd like.
Someone mentioned Equifax.
Yes. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. I'm curious, every time you check that, does that affect your credit score to make it, I guess, worse? Or because you have to get maybe a soft credit check when you get a new cell phone, but when you see those ads in the States, get your credit score, right? Does it affect it every so often?
I think it does. I think if you're logging in to do it, or contacting them, I know you can contact them to do it. I don't think it does, but if you're just tapping on the link in the emails, then it would, because it's more activity on your site. Is that what I I believe those work.
Any other questions? Oh, anyone here? My step count is loving this on my app right now. Yeah.
I'm just going to grab one thing while you're walking over there.
The question was for debt consolidation. Where should be like the first step to go to, whether it's a bank or what was the second one? Like money mentors or someone else? Like what
I would go to a money mentor before I'd go to a bank. With that, just the one caution I have with debt consolidation, and this might actually flow into the previous question about what other finance people say that I don't necessarily agree with. So debt consolidation can also, it's good and bad. It's good in the sense that it consolidates all of your payments into one, and it usually gets your interest rate lower. But it's bad in the sense that it can become a very daunting number. And so it's almost like pushing a huge snowball uphill, where if you don't consolidate debt and you start working on that list, going smallest debt to largest debt, by paying off the smallest debt first, you gain momentum and you gain excitement and you're proud of yourself and you see yourself working towards something. So then it's like pushing. So then you get rid of that small snowball and that one's gone. And then you move to the one that's a little bit bigger and you work at that one and you get that one up the hill and then that one's gone. And then, so it's a smaller pill to swallow. So it kind of depends on how you view the world. If you like to climb a high hill and don't mind that big daunting number, then debt consolidation can be really great. But if you are the type of person that likes to check off the box of accomplishments, and then I would recommend not consolidating your debt. And sure, the interest rates you may lose a little bit of money by the higher interest rates, but the momentum that you would get and the excitement and achievement that you receive would offset that interest.
These are really good, like really practical. I was just thinking, you've probably heard of Dave Ramsey.
Yes.
A lot of, not just people in the church, but a lot of people like his stuff. A lot of people,
yeah,
friends. What?
Yeah.
In regards to his, I don't know if you heard much of his financial advice, but he, I'm pretty sure what I've heard, doesn't really like credit cards.
Yeah.
He uses some pretty colorful language around some of that. So what is your view on his work and in regards to credit cards in itself?
Yeah. And I really like Dave Ramsey. I think he's very American with how he comes across. Sorry if there's Americans in the audience, but he's just very bold, and he challenges people where they need to be met. And I think there's some huge value in that. And he's actually the one where I heard about the debt snowball effect rather than the debt consolidation. And so that's one of his strategies that I've taken, and I've really liked that approach. I think he's got some very useful tips and tricks, and his beef against credit cards, I would say, is valid. So for emotional expenses, I try to do all of my emotional expenses with my debit card. I used to be all about the points with my credit card and trying to get travel points, but obviously travel points are not that valuable nowadays. But I think there is value in sticking within your debit card and being able to log onto your app and see how much you've spent versus how much you have left, where a credit card can be very unintentional, where it's easy to tap, it's easy to go. You can pay for that later. You don't have to actually be aware of how much money you have to cover those expenses until you need to pay that off. So if you can stick with your credit card, that is a great way to do it. If you can stick with your bank account, that is a great way to do it. My husband, within our bank account, he's much better at remembering to go in and transfer money. So he actually spends with the credit card throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, he pays the money off onto the credit card, or covers off those payments from our emotional spending account. I'm not that determined, or that, I guess determined isn't the right word, but I'm not that disciplined to be able to do that every night. Credit cards can be okay if used in the right hands and the right mentality. They can be very scary if they're used in the wrong hands. I saw a commercial the other day it was an advertisement for a credit card company, and I don't know their exact wording, but it made me shake my head and think that it's the last thing our society needs is to, I forget exactly the wording. I meant to write it down, but it was scary to think of how out of control people's expenses and spending can get. I wanted to show you this book as well. This is the lady, Stephanie Holmes Winton, and she is the lady that came up with the 21% number. So she has some great stuff in her book as well. Her book is called Spent, and she has a number of great practical and applicable words of wisdom.
Awesome. Okay, if we don't have any further questions, Erin, thank you so much for your time tonight. We wish we could saw you in person, but I know you had the symptoms there, so we have it. But guys, can we just give a round of applause maybe to her for her time tonight and sharing her expertise?